and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you are trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to ask for a couple of minutes of your time, if I may. I've mentioned before that this show is brought to you by direct financial support from listeners like you, mostly on Patreon, but a good number of people also throw a few dollars my way every month via Buy Me a Coffee or the PayPal tip jar on the website. I'm hearing from more people all the time how valuable they find the show, and I'm grateful to those supporters who have the means to help fund it, to keep it going, and to help me to reach new audiences. So if you're making use of Sleepy Time Tales regularly to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and of course, most importantly, if you can afford it, please check out patreon.com/sleepytimetales, or check out the link in the show notes, or go from the website to take a look at the bonuses you get for your contributions. Or if you're more inclined to make a once-off contribution, then check out buymeacoffee.com/sleepytimetales. That's also linked in the show notes, and there you can help out the show without even needing to sign up. But another huge way you can help is to just spread the word. If there's someone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to Sleepy Time Tales, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, make sure to tag me in so that I can know and I can thank you. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter. And of course, shout out to the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. The music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. I've linked the website in the show notes, as they've got some very cool stuff that they release under various names that I recommend taking a look. And thank you for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange idea, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to? But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended primarily to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night, or sometimes simply background noise or even just company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you without any pressure of the end coming. Now, as far as I know, there's a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, when I listen to my sleep podcast at night, I need something to actually focus on, a story or an event that lets me keep my mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties. I need to focus just enough to not resist the embrace of a night's sleep. Some people might need something a little bit different though, maybe more like background noise. Some people like to listen to white noise, the sound of the rain or wind or the ocean, or maybe just some boring dude droning on in the background. But however it is you choose to engage with the show or how you find the show works for you, the important thing is that you don't try to force the sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow sleep to come for you. Now obviously I'm hoping you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it is important that you don't feel pressurized. If this is your first night listening to Sleepy Time Tales, the odds are pretty good it's not going to work for you. If you are a new listener, I suggest taking a couple nights, probably 3, to see if you can sort of adjust to the idea. Telling people that you should listen to some dude talking in the background or something seems a bit strange. Or maybe you just need to get used to my accent, or sleeping with earbuds in, or something like that. But it's also possible that one episode just isn't long enough. If you've been struggling to sleep for a while, you may need to let a couple run through into each other. Or if you like something that I've developed in the last few years, maybe your problem isn't so much that you can't fall asleep. Maybe your problem is staying asleep, waking up in the middle of the night around 3 a.m. and staring at the ceiling, wondering if you can get back to sleep again. What I do because of this is I just put my podcasts on. I download a few episodes of the ones that I listen to, and usually like a whole night's worth of each one. And then when I go to bed, I start on the latest, let it run through. And then when it's still playing for me in the middle of the night, then I just carry on listening and fall back asleep again without even having to fiddle with my phone. Because it is better if you don't fiddle with your phone and get that light in your eyes in the middle of the night. So that's what works for me. Sometimes I even wake up a little bit before my alarm, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and I do the same thing. I carry on listening and I go right back to sleep again. And while it might sound strange, I've had people actually thank me for suggesting that they try that. They found it really groundbreaking. Because, like I say, it sounds odd, but that 30 minutes or 60 minutes can really be the best part of my night. There's something about allowing yourself to relax completely right before the alarm that is satisfying on a whole deep new level. And that's the main thing. It's important that you relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you, so just give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Tonight we return to the Cossacks by Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 7. The sun had already set, and the shades of night were rapidly spreading from the edge of the wood. The Cossacks finished their task round the cordon and gathered in the hut for supper. Only the old man still stayed under the plane tree watching for the vulture and pulling the string tied to the falcon's leg. But though a vulture was really perching on the plane tree, it declined to swoop down on the lure. Lukashka, singing one song after another, was leisurely placing nets among the very thickest brambles to trap pheasants. In spite of his tall stature and big hands, every kind of work, both rough and delicate, prospered under Lukashka's fingers. "Hello, Luke," came Nazarka's shrill, sharp voice calling him from the thicket close by. "The Cossacks have gone in to supper." Nazarka, with a live pheasant under his arm, forced his way through the brambles and emerged on the footpath. "Oh," said Lukashka, breaking off in his song. "Where did you get that cock pheasant? I suppose it was in my trap." Nazarka was of the same age as Lukashka and had only been at the front since the previous spring. He was plain, thin and puny, with a shrill voice that rang in one's ears. They were neighbors and comrades. Lukashka was sitting on the grass cross-legged like a Tartar, adjusting his nets. "I didn't know whose it was. Yours, I expect." "Was it beyond the pit by the plane tree? Then it is mine. I set the nets last night." Lukashka rose and examined the captured pheasant. After stroking the dark, burnished head of the bird, which rolled its eyes and stretched out its neck in terror, Lukashka took the pheasant in his hands. "We'll have it in a pilau tonight. You go and kill and pluck it." "And shall we eat it ourselves or give it to the corporal?" "He has plenty." "I don't like killing them," said Nazarka. "Give it here." "I say, Lukashka, that fiend will be sending us to the ambush again tonight," he said, taking up the bird. He was alluding to the corporal. "He has sent for Mushkin to get wine, and it ought to be his turn. He always puts it on us." Lukashka went whistling along the cordon. "Take the string with you," he shouted. Nazarka obeyed. "I'll give him a bit of my mind today, I really will," continued Nazarka. "Let's say we won't go. We're tired out, and that's an end of it. No, really, you tell him. He'll listen to you. It's too bad." "Get along with you. What a thing to make a fuss about," said Lukashka, evidently thinking of something else. "What bosh. If he made us turn out one of the villages at night now, that would be annoying. There one can have some fun. But here, what is there? It's all one whether we're in the cordon or in an ambush. What a fellow you are." "And are you going to the village?" "I'll go for the holidays." "Gurka says your Dunyaka is carrying on with Fomushkin," said Nazarka suddenly. "Well, let her go to the devil," said Lukashka, showing his regular white teeth, though he did not laugh. "As if I couldn't find another." "Gurka says he went to her house. Her husband was out and there was Fomushkin sitting and eating pie. Gurka stopped a while and then went away, and passing by the window he heard her say, 'He's gone, the fiend. Why don't you eat your pie, my own? You needn't go home for the night,' she says. And Gurka under the window says to himself, 'That's fine.'" "You're making it up." "No, quite true, by heaven." "Well, if she's found another, let her go to the devil," said Lukashka after a pause. "There's no lack of girls, and I was sick of her anyway." "We'll see what a devil you are," said Nazarka. "You should make up to the Kornitz girl, Maryanka. Why doesn't she walk out with anyone?" Lukashka frowned. "What of Maryanka? They're all alike," said he. "Well, you just try. What do you think? Are girls so scarce in the village?" And Lukashka recommenced whistling and went along the cordon, pulling leaves and branches from the bushes as he went. Suddenly catching sight of a smooth sapling, he drew the knife from the handle of his dagger and cut it down. "What a ramrod it will make," he said, swinging the sapling till it whistled through the air. The Cossacks were sitting round a low Tartar table on the earthen floor of the clay-plastered outer room of the hut, when the question of whose turn it was to lie in ambush was raised. "Who is to go tonight?" shouted one of the Cossacks through the open door to the corporal in the next room. "Who is to go?" the corporal shouted back. "Uncle Burlak has been, and Fomushkin too," said he, not quite confidently. "You two had better go. You and Nazarka," he went on, addressing Lukashka. "And Ergushov must go. Surely he has slept it off?" "You don't sleep it off yourself, so why should he?" said Nazarka in a subdued voice. The Cossacks laughed. Ergushov was the Cossack who had been lying drunk and asleep near the hut. He had only that moment staggered into the room, rubbing his eyes. Lukashka had already risen and was getting his gun ready. "Be quick and go. Finish your supper and go," said the corporal. And without waiting for an expression of consent, he shut the door, evidently not expecting the Cossack to obey. Of course, thought he, if I hadn't been ordered to, I wouldn't send anyone, but an officer might turn up at any moment. As it is, they say abreks have crossed over. Well, I suppose I must go, remarked Ergushov. It's the regulation. Can't be helped. The times are such. I say we must go. Meanwhile, Lubashka, holding a big piece of pheasant to his mouth with both hands, and glancing now at Nazarka, now at Ergushov, seemed quite indifferent to what passed, and only laughed at them both. Before the Cossacks were ready to go into ambush, Uncle Atroshka, who had been vainly waiting under the plane tree till night fell, entered the dark outer room. Well, lads, his loud bass resounded through the low-roofed room, drowning all the other voices. I'm going with you. You'll watch for Chechens and I'll watch for Boers. Chapter 8. It was quite dark when Uncle Eroshka and the 3 Cossacks, in their cloaks and shouldering their guns, left the cordon and went towards the place on the Terek, where they were to lie in ambush. Nazarka did not want to go at all, but Lukashka shouted at him and they soon started. After they had gone a few steps in silence, the Cossacks turned aside from the ditch and went along a path almost hidden by reeds till they reached the river. On its bank lay a thick black log cast up by the water. The reeds around it had been recently beaten down. Shall we lie here? Asked Nazarka. Why not? Answered Lukashka. Sit down here and I'll be back in a minute. I'll only show Daddy where to go. This is the best place. Here we can see and not be seen, said Ergushov. So it's where we'll lie. It's a first-rate place. Nazarka and Ergushov spread out their cloaks and settled down behind the log, while Lukashka went on with Uncle Eroshka. It's not far from here, Daddy, said Lukashka, stepping softly in front of the old man. I'll show you where they've been. I'm the only one that knows, Daddy. Show me. You're a fine fellow, a regular snatcher, replied the old man, also whispering. Having gone a few steps, Lukashka stopped, stooped down over a puddle and whistled. Here's where they come to drink, do you see? He spoke in a barely audible voice, pointing to fresh hoofprints. Christ bless you, answered the old man. The boar will be in the hollow beyond the ditch, he added. Till watch and you can go. Lukashka pulled his cloak up higher and walked back alone, throwing swift glances now to the left at the wall of reeds, now to the Terek rushing by below the bank. I dare say he's watching or creeping along somewhere. He thought of a possible Chechen hillsman. Suddenly a loud rustling and a splash in the water made him start and seize his musket. From under the bank a boar leapt up, his dark outline showing for a moment against the glassy surface of the water and then disappearing among the reeds. Lukashka pulled out his gun and aimed, but before he could fire, the boar had disappeared in the thicket. Lukashka spat with vexation and went on. On approaching the ambuscade, he halted again and whistled softly. His whistle was answered, and he stepped up to his comrades. Nazarka, all curled up, was already asleep. Ergushov sat with his legs crossed and moved slightly to make room for Lukashka. How jolly it is to sit here. It's really a good place, said he. Did you take him there? Showed him where, answered Lukashka, spreading out his cloak. But what a big boar I roused just now close to the water. I expect it was the very one. You must have heard the crash. I did hear a beast crashing through. I knew at once it was a beast. I thought to myself, Lukashka has roused a beast, Ergushov said, wrapping himself up in his cloak. Now I'll go to sleep, he added. Wake me when the cocks crow. We must have discipline. I'll lie down and have a nap, and then you'll have a nap and I'll watch. That's the way. Luckily I don't want to sleep, answered Lukashka. The night was dark, warm and still. Only on one side of the sky the stars were shining. The other and greater part was overcast by one huge cloud stretching from the mountain tops. The black cloud, blending in the absence of any wind with the mountains, moved slowly onwards. Its curved edges sharply denned against the deep, starry sky. Only in front of him could the Cossack discern the Terek and the distance beyond. Behind and on both sides he was surrounded by a wall of reeds. Occasionally the reeds would sway and rustle against one another, apparently without cause. Seen from down below, against the clear part of the sky, their waving tufts looked like the feathery branches of trees. Close in front at his very feet was the bank, and at its base the rushing torrent. A little further on was the moving mass of glassy brown water which eddied rhythmically along the bank and round the shallows. Further still, water banks and cloud all merged together in an impenetrable gloom. Along the surface of the water floated black shadows in which the experienced eyes of the Cossack detected trees carried down by the current. Only very rarely sheet lightning, mirrored in the water as in a black glass, disclosed the sloping bank opposite. The rhythmic sounds of night, the rustling of the reeds, the snoring of the Cossacks, the hum of the mosquitoes and the rushing water, were every now and then broken by a shot fired in the distance, or by the gurgling of water where a piece of bank slipped down, the splash of a big fish or the crashing of an animal breaking through the thick undergrowth in the wood. Once an owl flew past along the Terek, flapping one wing against the other rhythmically at every second beat. Just above the Cossack's head it turned toward the wood, and then striking its wings no longer after every other flap, but at every flap, it flew to an old plane tree where it rustled about for a long time, before settling down among the branches. At every one of these unexpected sounds the watching Cossack listened intently, straining his hearing and screwing up his eyes while he deliberately felt for his musket. The greater part of the night was past. The black cloud that had moved westward revealed the clear starry sky from under its torn edge, and the golden upturned crescent of the moon shone above the mountains with a reddish light. The cold began to be penetrating. Nazarka awoke, spoke a little, and fell asleep again. Lukashka, feeling bored, got up, drew the knife from his dagger handle, and began to fashion his stick into a ramrod. His head was full of the Chechens who lived over there in the mountains, and of how their brave lads came across and were not afraid of the Cossacks, and might even now be crossing the river at some other spot. He thrust himself out of his hiding place and looked along the river, but could see nothing. And as he continued looking out at the intervals upon the river and at the opposite bank, now dimly distinguishable from the water in the faint moonlight, he no longer thought about the Chechens, but only of when it would be time to wake his comrades, and of going home to the village. In the village he imagined Dunyaka, his little soul as the Cossacks call a man's mistress, and thought of her with vexation. Silvery mists, a sign of coming morning, glittered white above the water, and not far from him young eagles were whistling and flapping their wings. At last the crowing of a cock reached him from the distant village, followed by the long sustained note of another, which was again answered by yet other voices. Time to wake them, thought Lukashka, who had finished his ramrod and felt his eyes growing heavy. Turning to his comrades, he managed to make out which pair of legs belonged to whom, when it suddenly seemed to him that he heard something splash on the other side of the Terek. He turned again towards the horizon beyond the hills, where day was breaking under the upturned crescent, glanced at the outline of the opposite bank, at the Terek, and at the now distinctly visible driftwood upon it. For one instant it seemed to him that he was moving, and that the terek, with the drifting wood, remained stationary. Again he peered out. One large black log, with a branch particularly, attracted his attention. The tree was floating in a strange way right down the middle of the stream, neither rocking nor whirling. It even appeared not to be floating altogether with the current, but to be crossing it in the direction of the shallows. Lukashka stretched out his neck, watching it intently. The tree floated to the shallows, stopped and shifted in a peculiar manner. Lukashka thought he saw an arm stretch out from beneath the tree. Suppose I killed an abrek all by myself, he thought, and seized his gun with a swift, unhurried movement, putting up his gun rest, placing the gun upon it, and holding it noiselessly in position. Cocking the trigger with bated breath, he took aim, still peering out intently. I won't wake them, he thought, but his heart began beating so fast that he remained motionless, listening. Suddenly the trunk gave a plunge, and again began to float across the stream towards our bank. Only not to miss, thought he. And now by the faint light of the moon he caught a glimpse of a Tartar's head in front of the floating wood. He aimed straight at the head, which appeared to be quite near, just at the end of his rifle's barrel. He glanced across. Right enough, it is an abrek, he thought joyfully, and suddenly rising to his knees he again took aim. Having found the sight, barely visible at the end of the long gun, he said, "In the name of the Father and of the Son," in the Cossack way learnt in his childhood, and pulled the trigger. A flash of lightning lit up for an instant the reeds in the water, and the sharp, abrupt report of the shot was carried across the river, changing into a prolonged roll somewhere in the far distance. The piece of driftwood now floated not across, but with the current, rocking and whirling. "Stop, I say," exclaimed Ergushov, seizing his musket and raising himself behind the log near which he was lying. "Shut up, you devil," whispered Lukashka, grinding his teeth. "Abreks." "Whom have you shot?" asked Nazarka. "Who was it, Lukashka?" Lukashka did not answer. He was reloading his gun and watching the floating wood. A little way off it stopped on a sandbank, and from behind it something large that rocked in the water came into view. "What did you shoot? Why don't you speak?" insisted the Cossacks. "Abreks, I tell you," said Lukashka. "Don't humbug. Did the gun go off?" "I've killed an abrek, and that's what I fired at," muttered Lukashka in a voice choked by emotion as he jumped to his feet. "A man was swimming," he said, pointing to the sandbank. "I killed him, just look there." "Have done with your humbugging," said Ergushov again, rubbing his eyes. "Have done with what?" "Look there," said Lukashka, seizing him by the shoulders and pulling with him such force that Ergushov groaned. He looked in the direction in which Lukashka pointed, and discerning a body immediately changed his tone. "Oh Lord, but I say more will come. I tell you the truth," said he softly, and began examining his musket. "That was a scout swimming across. Either the others are here already or are not far off on the other side. I tell you for sure." Lukashka was unfastening his belt and taking off his Circassian coat. "What are you up to, you idiot?" exclaimed Ergushov. "Only show yourself and you've lost all for nothing." "I'll tell you true. If you've killed him, he won't escape. Let me have a little powder for my musket band. You have some? Nazarka, you go back to the cordon and look alive. But don't go along the bank or you'll be killed. I tell you true." "Catch me going alone." "Go yourself," said Nazarka angrily. Having taken off his coat, Lukashka went down to the bank. "Don't go in, I tell you," said Ergushov, putting some powder on the pan. Look, he's not moving, I can see. It's nearly morning. Wait till they come from the cordon. You go, Nazarka. You're afraid. Don't be afraid, I tell you. Luke. I say, Lukashka, tell us how you did it, said Nazarka. Lukashka changed his mind about going into the water just then. Go quick to the cordon and I will watch. Tell the Cossacks to send out the patrol. If the Abreks are on the side, they must be caught, said he. That's what I say. They'll get off, said Ogashov, rising. True, they must be caught. Ogashov and Nazarka rose and, crossing themselves, started off for the cordon. Not along the river bank, but breaking their way through the brambles to reach a path in the wood. Now mind, Lukashka, they may cut you down here, so you'd best keep a sharp lookout, I tell you. Go along, I know, muttered Lukashka, and having examined his gun again, he sat down behind the log. He remained alone and sat gazing at the shallows and listening for the Cossacks. But it was some distance to the cordon, and he was tormented by impatience. He kept thinking that the other Abreks who were with the one he had killed were at escape. He was vexed with the Abreks who were going to escape, just as he had been with the boar that had escaped the evening before. He glanced round and at the opposite bank, expecting every moment to see a man, and having arranged his gun rest, he was ready to fire. The idea that he himself might be killed never entered his head. Chapter 9. It was growing light. The Chechen's body, which was gently rocking in the shallow water, was now clearly visible. Suddenly the reeds rustled, not far from Luke, and he heard steps and saw the feathery tops of the reeds moving. He set his gun at full cock and muttered, "In the name of the Father and of the Son." But when the cock clicked, the sound of steps ceased. "Hello, Cossacks. Don't kill your daddy," said a deep bass voice calmly, and moving the reeds apart, Daddy Eroshka came up close to Luke. "I very nearly killed you, by God I did," said Lukashka. "What have you shot?" asked the old man. His sonorous voice resounded through the wood and downward along the river, suddenly dispelling the mysterious quiet of night round the Cossack. It was as if everything had suddenly become lighter and more distinct. "Then, uncle, you have not seen anything, but I've killed a beast," said Lukashka, uncocking his gun and getting up with unnatural calmness. The old man was staring intently at the white back, now clearly visible, against which the Terek rippled. "He was swimming with a log on his back. I spied him out. Look there. He's got blue trousers and a gun, I think. Do you see?" inquired Luke. "How can one help seeing?" said the old man angrily, and a serious and stern expression appeared on his face. "You've killed a brave," he said, apparently with regret. "Well, I sat here and suddenly saw something dark on the other side. I spied him when he was still over there. It was as if a man had come here and fallen in. Strange. And his piece of driftwood, a good-sized piece, comes floating. Not with the stream, but across it. And what do I see but a head appearing from under it? Strange. I stretched out of the reeds, but could see nothing. Then I rose, and he must have heard the beast, and crept out into the shallows and looked around. 'No, you don't,' I said as soon as he landed and looked around. 'You won't get away.' There was something choking me. I got my gun ready, but did not stir, and looked out. He waited a little and then swam out again, and when he came into the moonlight, I could see his whole back." "And so you got him," said the old man. "He is far away now, my lad," and again he shook his head sadly. Just then the sound reached them of breaking bushes and the loud voices of Cossacks, approaching along the bank on horseback and on foot. "Are you bringing the skiff?" shouted Lukashka. "You're a trump, Luke. Lug it to the bank," shouted one of the Cossacks. Without waiting for the skiff, Lukashka began to undress, keeping an eye all the while on his prey. "Wait a bit. Nazarka is bringing the skiff," shouted the corporal. "You fool. Maybe he's alive and only pretending. Take your dagger with you," shouted another Cossack. "Get along," cried Luke, pulling off his trousers. He quickly undressed and, crossing himself, jumped, plunging with a splash into the river. Then, with long strokes of his white arms, lifting his back high out of the water and breathing deeply, he swam across the torrent of the Terek towards the shadows. A crowd of Cossacks stood on the bank talking loudly. 3 horsemen rode off to patrol. The skiff appeared around a bend. Lukashka stood up on the sandbank, leaned over the body, and gave it a couple of shakes. "Quite dead," he shouted in a shrill voice. "What a cop you've landed," cried one of the Cossacks, who had assembled in a circle as the body, lifted out of the skiff, was laid on the bank, pressing down the grass. The angel of silence had taken wing. The Cossacks began bustling about and talking. 2 of them went to cut brushwood for a shelter. Others strolled across the cordon. Luke and Nazarka ran to get ready to go to the village. Half an hour later, they were both on their way homewards, talking incessantly and almost running through the dense woods which separated the Terek from the village. "Mind, don't tell her I send you, but just go and find out if her husband is at home," Luke was saying in a shrill voice. "And I'll go round to Yamka too," said the devoted Nazarka. "We'll have a spree, shall we?" "When should we have one if not today?" replied Luke. When they reached the village, the 2 Cossacks drank and lay down to sleep till evening. Chapter 10. On the 3rd day after the events above described, 2 companies of a Caucasian infantry regiment arrived at the Cossack village of Novomlinsk. The horses had been unharnessed and the company's wagons were sitting in the square. The cooks had dug a pit and, with logs gathered from various yards, where they had not been sufficiently securely stored, were now cooking the food. The pay sergeants were settling accounts with the soldiers. The service corps men were driving piles in the ground to which to tie the horses, and the quartermasters were going about the streets just as if they were at home, showing officers and men to their quarters. Here were green ammunition boxes in a line, the company's carts, horses, and cauldrons in which buckwheat porridge was being cooked. Here were the captain and the lieutenant and the sergeant major, Onisim Mikhailovich. And all this was in the Cossack village, where it was reported that the companies were ordered to take up their quarters. Therefore, they were at home here too. But why they were stationed there, who the Cossacks were, and whether they wanted the troops to be there, and whether they were old believers or not, all was quite immaterial. Having received their pay and been dismissed, tired out and covered with dust, the soldiers noisily and in disorder, like a swarm of bees about to settle, spread out over the squares and streets, quite regardless of the Cossacks' ill will. Chattering merrily and with their muskets clinking, by 2s and 3s they entered the huts and hung up their accoutrements, unpacked their bags and bantered with women. At their favourite spot, round the porridge cauldrons, a large group of soldiers assembled, and with little pipes between their teeth they gazed, now at the smoke which rose into the hot sky, becoming visible when it thickened into white clouds as it rose, and now at the campfires which were quivering in the pure air like molten glass, and bantered and made fun of the Cossack men and women because they did not live at all like the Russians. In all the yards one could see the soldiers and hear their laughter, and the exasperated and shrill cries of Cossack women defending their houses and refusing to give the soldiers water or cooking utensils. Little boys and girls, clinging to their mothers and to each other, followed all the movements of the troopers, never before seen by them, with frightened curiosity. or ran after them at a respectful distance. The old Cossacks came out silently and dismally, and sat on the earthen embankments of their huts, and watched the soldiers' activity with an air of leaving it all to the will of God, without understanding what would come of it. Olenin, who had joined the Caucasian army as a cadet 3 months before, was quartered in one of the best houses of the village, the house of the cornet, Elias Vasilik, that is to say, at Granny Ulitka's. Goodness knows what it'll be like, Dmitry Andreevich, said the panting Vanyusha to Olenin, who, dressed in a Circassian coat and mounted on a Kabarda horse, which he had bought in Grozno, was after a 5 hours' march gaily entering the yard of the quarters assigned to him. "Why, what's the matter?" he asked, caressing his horse and looking merrily at the perspiring, dishevelled and worried Vanyusha, who had arrived with the baggage wagons and was unpacking. Olenin looked quite a different man. In spite of his clean-shaven lips and chin, he had a youthful moustache and a small beard. Instead of a sallow complexion, the result of nights turned into day, his cheeks, his forehead, and his skin behind his ears were now red with healthy sunburn. In place of a clean new black suit, he wore a dirty white Circassian coat with a deeply pleated skirt, and he bore arms. Instead of a freshly starched collar, his neck was tightly clasped by the red band of his silk beshmet. He wore Circassian dress, but did not wear it well, and anyone would have known him for a Russian and not a Tatar brave. It was the thing, but not the real thing. But for all that, his whole person breathed health, joy, and satisfaction. "Yes, it seems funny to see you," said Vanyusha, "but just try to talk to these people yourself. They set themselves against one, and there's an end of it. You can't get as much as a word out of them." Vanyusha angrily threw down a pail on the threshold. "Somehow they don't seem to like Russians." "You should speak to the chief of the village." "But I don't know where he lives," said Vanyusha in an offended tone. "Who has upset you so?" asked Olenin, looking around. "The devil only knows. For there's no real master here. They say he has gone to some kind of Krieger, and the old woman is a real devil." "God preserve us," answered Vanyusha, putting his hands to his head. "How we shall live here I don't know. They are worse than Tartars, I do declare, although they consider themselves Christians. A Tartar is bad enough, but all the same he is more noble. Gone to the Krieger indeed. What is this Krieger they have invented is I don't know," concluded Vanyusha and turned aside. "It's not as it is in the serfs' quarters at home, eh?" chaffed Olenin without dismounting. "Please, sir, may I have your horse?" said Vanyusha, evidently perplexed by this new order of things, but resigning himself to his fate. "So Tartar is more noble, eh, Vanyusha?" repeated Olenin, dismounting and slapping the saddle. "Yes, you're laughing. You think it's funny," muttered Vanyusha angrily. "Come, don't be angry, Vanyusha," replied Olenin, still smiling. "Wait a minute. I'll go and speak to the people of the house. You'll see I shall arrange everything. You don't know what a jolly life we shall have here. Don't get upset." Vanyusha did not answer. Screwing up his eyes, he looked contemptuously after his master and shook his head. Vanyusha regarded Olenin as only his master, and Olenin regarded Vanyusha as only his servant, and they would both have been much surprised if anyone had told them they were friends, as they really were without knowing it themselves. Vanyusha had been taken into a proprietor's house when he was only 11, and Olenin was the same age. When Olenin was 15, he gave Vanyusha lessons for a time, and taught him to read French, of which the latter was inordinately proud, and when in especially good spirits he could still let off French words, always laughing stupidly when he did so. Olenin ran up the steps of the porch and pushed open the door of the hut. Maryanka, wearing nothing but a pink smock, as all Cossack women do in the house, jumped away from the door frightened, and pressing herself against the wall, covered the lower part of her face with the broad sleeve of her Tartar smock. Having opened the door wider, Olenin, in the semi-darkness of the passage, saw the whole tall figure of the young Cossack girl. With the quick and eager curiosity of youth, he involuntarily noticed her form revealed by the fine print smock, and the eyes fixed on him with childlike terror and wild curiosity. This is she, thought Olenin, but there will be many others like her, came at once into his head. And he opened the inner door. Old Granny Ulitka, also dressed only in a smock, was stooping with her back turned to him, sweeping the floor. "Good day to you, mother. I've come about my lodgings," he began. The Cossack woman, without unbending, turned her severe but still handsome face towards him. "What have you come here for? Want to mock at us, eh? I'll teach you to mock. May the black plague seize you," she shouted, looking askance from under her frowning brow at the newcomer. Olenin had at first imagined that the way-worn, gallant Caucasian army, of which he was a member, would be everywhere received joyfully, and especially by the Cossacks, our comrades in the war, and he therefore felt perplexed by the reception. Without losing presence of mind, however, he tried to explain that he meant to pay for his lodging, but the old woman would not give him a hearing. "What have you come for? Who wants a pest like you with your scraped face? You just wait a bit. When the master returns, he'll show you your place. I don't want your dirty money. A likely thing, just as if we had never seen any. You'll stink the house out with your beastly tobacco, and you want to put it right with money? I think we've never seen such a pest." "May you be shot in your bowels and your heart," shrieked the old woman in a piercing voice, interrupting Olenin. It seems Vanyusha was right, thought Olenin. A Tartar would be nobler. And followed by Granny Ulitka's abuse, he went out of the hut. As he was leaving, Maryanka, still wearing her pink smock, but with her forehead covered down to her eyes by a white kerchief, suddenly slipped out from the passage past him. Pattering rapidly down the steps with her bare feet, she ran from the porch, stopped and, looking round hastily with laughing eyes at the young man, vanished round the corner of the hut. Her firm youthful step, the untamed look of the eyes glistening from under the white kerchief, struck Olenin even more powerfully than before. "There you see. The girl too is quite savage, just like a wild filly," said Vanyusha, who, though still busy with the luggage wagon, had now cheered up a bit. "La femme," he added in a loud triumphant voice, and burst out laughing. And I think I'm going to leave it there for tonight. If you want to pick up where we left off, you can, as usual, find the original on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. I don't think I'm going to carry on with this particular book. It's a good read, but I don't think it's actually a great bedtime story. A little bit too much action in it, and some stuff that I'm not really comfortable going into. I edited quite a bit going through, a little bit of violent stuff, and, well, it's 19th century, so it is what it is. Probably still a good read, but not a Sleepy Time Tales book from here on out, I don't think. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Nights and Friends by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.